What's up, Renegade Nation? Before we begin the video, I'd like to give a big shout out to our most recent Patreon supporters: Marshall Selden, Sal Online, Lee Maths, Scrim, Sky, Luis A. Sandoval, Derek Perry, Alex Santana, Connor Fergus, Rodney Warnock, Ulfra Nord, Marble Hornet, Adil Javid, Megan Andrews, James Rukibwa, Tobias Gladden, and GXR7. Thank you all very much for your support, and if you want to support us on Patreon, feel free to click the link down below in the description to find out more. We'll see you there.
Brothers, it is time for us to learn some 40k lore. For the Emperor and the glory of the Imperium.
All right.
Teach me your ways.
Teach me,
Teach me the history.
Yes. Teach us all the history.
Basically, there are several lore channels, and it's hotly debated as to which one's the most accurate and the best one to check out. And the reason I have picked Oculus Imperium, with some okays from some people in the comment section on one of our previous 40k videos that we did, is because he does this in a format that is bite-sized enough for us to be able to have time to actually sit down and do one during our regular recording schedule.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So just starting from the very beginning of his channel, we just sorted it backwards and started from the beginning. And the first one is the Unification Wars and the origin of the Great Crusade, Warhammer and the Horus Heresy War.
You see, the whole thing with Warhammer 40k is I'm expecting nothing but the most brutal metal shit that you can imagine for origin stories. And you know what? I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
So, let's see what
This
happens.
might give me some inspiration for song lyrics eventually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that'd be awesome.
Which I need, because my ADD gives me writer's block quite often, so.
Well, we'll see if this helps you with the whole thing. All right, here we go. Oculus Imperia.
To understand the fall, one must first understand the rise. To understand the tragedy of the Horus Heresy, one must first grasp the glory of the Great Crusade, and of unity before that. Know then that this is a record of the history of Terra, the throne world, and the cradle, and the crusade from whence it would be launched. While records of the time before the coming of the Emperor are few and fragmentary, memories and scars of old night persist, and from them much can be gleaned. Terra itself, rather aptly, serves as an example in miniature for the history of humanity. During the great and terrible Dark Age
Terra
of
is
technology,
Earth.
the 8,000-year epoch between the 14th and 22nd millennia,
that's one of the names
mankind
for
mastered
Earth.
the stars, with Terra serving as the capital of a first great stellar empire, built upon the back of faster-than-light travel through a parallel dimension of exotic energy known as the Warp. It is not known when the collapse occurred. It is likely that no one date can ever be put on any one calamity. As with most failings of empire, the decay occurred over centuries or millennia, precipitating a cascading series of catastrophes that would humble an entire species. Over the course of M23 and M24, mankind's empire collapsed due to the onset of rampant galactic etheric disturbance, thinking machine uprisings, and the emergence of the psychic gene across humanity's gene pool. With the violent and impenetrable warp storms rendering interstellar travel and communication impossible, centralized authority collapsed. As this apparatus
Pause for 1 second.
disintegrated, millions of
So just some extra background, the warp is a really cool concept because that's how they're able to do interstellar travel, but the warp is almost like a hell-like alternate dimension from what I've gathered, and creatures and monstrosities and shit live there. And at some point, I don't think we'll have it explained in this video, but there was a thing happening where there were storms within the warp that made it nearly impossible for anyone to be able to travel through it. And it had a big detriment on the humans and the elves and or the Eldar rather, and a lot of the different races, because they just weren't able to get to the different places they have already.
In Warhammer.
Yeah, they are not able to travel between their already established outposts and shit. So a lot of people got cut off from each other, and decay happened as a result because places that weren't entirely independent had a hard time surviving this whole thing. So just a heads up on that.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
what he meant by warp storms.
All right. Well, let's so let's see what happens here.
Human worlds and systems fell into civil war, famine, destruction, or worse, invasions of warp creatures caused by the rampant and exponential outbreaks of psychers unable to channel their newfound powers. Xenos races long thought subjugated resurged, enslaving or wiping out colony after colony. Bereft of outside contact, many surviving worlds simply degraded into pre-industrial levels of barbarism. Terra, long since left polluted by mankind's hunger for resources, devolved as so many of its colonies did. The homeworld was plunged into a state of constant war, further scarring its own surface, as the warlords that rose in place of the putrefied human dominion unleashed atomic, biological, and genetic weaponry upon their enemies. These petty empires would rise and fall and rise again
like a really
over the course of 5,000
over-the-top
years.
Mad Max
By
type
M29,
situation
Terra
that they
was
had
scar
going
tissue
on.
a planetary scale, a blasted, irradiated wasteland of reaving clans, genocidal despots, and mad sorcerer kings. All traces of civilization had been crushed under the heel of gen-hanced soldiers and the treads of crude, armored machines. It was at this point the Emperor of Mankind chose to reveal himself. At this point in history, he was, in many ways, a far cry from what he would later become. As blasphemous as the statement may seem, he was just another warlord vying for the ultimate goal of conquering all of Terra, a feat none had succeeded in doing since the dark age of technology. Yet, a common tyrant he was not. It was clear to all who encountered him that the Emperor was something else entirely. He was, in fact, humanity's first psyker, a being of unparalleled mental power, an immortal who had shielded his existence from human sight until he judged the time for his emergence to be most apt. The Emperor set out upon a series of campaigns to unite the homeworld and crushed all who opposed him, thus destroying any enemies that would stand in the way of human progress. Resistance was, perhaps unsurprisingly, quite plentiful. These campaigns are known to history as the Unification Wars, and form the foundation of the Great Crusade. While it may do some disservice to the men and women who fought in them, it is nonetheless safe to declare that the Unification Wars were primarily won through the use of the first stably genetically engineered human soldiers, the Emperor's own Thunder Warriors. The polities of Terra had for many thousands of years employed crude genetic enhancement to bolster their hordes, but all too often these were simply mobs of muscular grotesques or bulky uterine stock, and it was not until the genius of the Emperor's science that true superhumans would grace the killing fields of Terra. The Thunder Warriors were the perfect soldiers for this shadowed epoch, vicious, relentless, and remorseless killing machines. The Emperor needed an army of savages to conquer a savage planet, and the butchery the Thunder Warriors
precursors to the
Astartes eclipsed the techno-barbarians they faced 100.
Looks like a Thor's hammer.
The Emperor saw the need for augmented humanity in his galactic vision, and used the Wars of Unity as a grand testing ground. The Thunder Warriors would serve as a template for the Legion as Astartes, but it must be made abundantly clear that they were not Astartes themselves. Their design, although undoubtedly a product of the Emperor's brilliance, was altogether cruder. Organized into 20 regiments, they were said to stand even taller than the Astartes that succeeded them, and were, in fact, stronger than their Legion descendants. They were blunt instruments of destruction, tailored by the Emperor to be highly resistant to the psychic powers employed all too recklessly by his enemies. Their Mark I Thunder armor was unsophisticated but undeniably effective, much like the warriors themselves. It was, however, not enclosed and had no life support systems, making it only suitable for combat on Terra and, perhaps, certain enclosed environments on Terra's moon, Luna. The Thunder Warriors were accompanied on their campaigns by numerous other military formations raised by the Emperor from amongst his conquered lands, including the Geno 5-2 Chiliad and the Inferalti Hussars. Slowly, and at a massive cost of human life, the Emperor brought the petty kingdoms and regimes of Terra under his heel. Some came with less bloodshed than others. An early alliance with the Ural mountain-based Terrawat clan earned the Emperor the loyalty of the clan's Theologitex and the great boon of their advanced weaponry. The Achaemenid Empire swore timely fealty to escape the wrath of the Thunder Warriors and avoided the worst depredations of the war. The nations of Frank and Merica fell easily, but it was not so elsewhere. Albia, in the planet's northern Atlan reaches, resisted the Thunder Warriors heavily with armored soldiers and machines of their own, only to pledge loyalty to the Emperor, who appeared before them in simple robes to offer them his vision of unity. In the Caucasus, the ruling ethnarchy's eugenicists deployed their own genetically enhanced warriors, as well as enslaved psychers, to combat the armies of Unity, leading to the deaths of over 10,000 Thunder Warriors and 1 million...
That's like an evil Minas Tirith from friggin' Lord of the Rings. It's like a friggin' large.
That's what I was actually thinking of.
I think that's bigger than anything else I've ever seen, just from the looks of it. Like, that is a huge castle.
Yeah, well, it's probably carved out of a fucking mountain.
Kind of looks that way.
I wouldn't doubt it, dude. I mean, imagine. Okay,
Looks like they just took Everest and turned it into a castle.
that's effectively. Well, this is set in the Caucasus, so they probably took one of the higher mountains in the Caucasus Mountains, and then boom, just turned it into that.
Get up top and take a glider. Whee, jump off the top.
Go base
Unaugmented
jumping?
Human troops.
Like Breath
To his
of the Wild.
conquered enemies, the Emperor would often prove surprisingly merciful, choosing to imprison despots such as Ulim the Red in his Himalaysian prison of Kangba Mawu. That being said, the most dangerous or deranged would be executed without fail. This was the fate that would ultimately befall the tyrant of the Pan-Pacific Empire, North-End Doom, as well as Callaghan of Ursh and the warp-possessed priest king of the Nordic Molalan Sen Confederacy. Throughout all the bloodshed, the Emperor was at pains to spread his imperial truth, the atheistic ideology that science is the savior of humanity and the universe is devoid of all gods or supernatural beings. The imperial truth brooked no argument, and its adaptation was fundamental to the establishment of a stable Terran regime in an age of mad demagogues, cloying superstition, and rampant ignorance. The blood price of unity was high, and the atrocities many. It was during this era that the last of Terra's oceans were drained by Koja Zu, minister of the Anuatan Steppes, and Cardinal Tang of the Indonesian bloc set about his pogroms to slaughter those who he deemed to be participating in inferior breeding. But despite the seemingly relentless tide of barbarism, victory was perhaps inevitable. As the war drew to a close, the Emperor began to deploy the first Astartes proto-legions, known in this era only by their individual numerical designations, to select battlefields to augment his Thunder Warrior regiments. Their individual exploits are covered in later records, but their presence deserves notation in this one, as by this stage in the war it was clear to many in the higher imperial circles that the age of the Thunder Warriors was coming to an end. The oldest of these savages were already undergoing severe genetic degradation, and as more and more Astartes were cultivated in the Emperor's gene factories, the need for the hyper-violent Thunder Warriors were eclipsed by their altogether more stable genetic cousins. Records on just when the final battle of the Unification Wars occurred differ. There are some who place the massacre at Gajuare in Frank, where 5,000 Thunder Warriors defeated 50,000 rebels, as Unity's capstone, while others place it at the supposed purge of the remaining Thunder Warriors following the Battle of Mount...
Well,
It's like some 100 shit.
well, a lot of people say the 300 Spartans was their
300, brother, yeah.
well, was the only ones defending the wall. No, the truth is there were a lot of Greeks that were there too. It's just the Spartans held a lot of the line themselves, but there were a lot of other warriors there. It wasn't just the Spartans. However, I will say this: the Mossad, the original Mossad, when the Roman Legion came through into Israel, 900 Mossad warriors held their own in the Holy Land against the Roman Empire and over 30,000 men. They held their own for almost a year and resisted, and they chose death over enslavement.
Yeah.
And the Mossad, that's pretty much like one of the modern day equivalents to the Mossad. That's actually the namesake of the Mossad, which is the Israeli Special Forces. There's actually a really clever line in The Sopranos, the show The Sopranos. Tony Soprano was tasked to get this Jewish business owner to give up his side of the business with no strings attached, and he walks away with nothing. And he sent two of his best guys to take care of it, and they tried their damnedest. I mean, they beat the shit out of this guy. They hit him with they threatened him with everything, and the only caveat of the deal was they couldn't kill him. That was the arrangement that they had with the original business, the guy who was taking the business away from him. They couldn't kill him because it would look bad because they were related. So anyway, the guy gets there. Tony gets there because Tony thought these two guys who were like his two biggest head breakers would be able to handle this shit. But Tony gets there. He's like, why don't you just give up this or that? And he tells Tony the story of the Mossad, and he said, the Jews and the Mossad, they're still here. Where are the Romans now? Tony Soprano looked at him and said, "You're looking at him, asshole." Because the Italians, Romans were Italian, and Italians became the mafia, and so on and so forth.
I'm gonna have to watch that show sometime.
It's a great show, man. It is a great show.
I'd like to watch it again.
I can wholeheartedly say it's one of my favorite shows of all time. But that being said, let's get back to this.
Aerllette. Regardless of the actual conclusion, the era of planetary war had ended on Terra circa the year 745 in M30, when the Emperor himself struck down the last church, and with it the last priest. The last recalcitrant kingdoms, such as High Brazil, had been tamed. The Thunder Warriors passed from active service into myth, and the Emperor proclaimed Terran unity. For the first time in millennia, Terra knew peace. The Emperor was not one to rest. In the final stages of the wars, he was already formulating his plans for extraplanetary dominion. Luna was, naturally, the first to fall under his eye. At this point in history, a subterranean warren of degenerate genetic cults. Terra's own geno-engineering facilities would not be able to meet the demands the upcoming crusade would place upon them, so the lunar gene forges would be vital to the Emperor's continuing success. To that end, he attempted to entreaty them into the nascent Imperium peacefully, but as more and more of his ambassadors were rebuked, prepared to take the satellite by force. When the final Imperial envoy was returned, fused with his retinue into a still screaming soup of barely recognizable human flesh, the Emperor sent his Astartes on what would be their first ever off-world deployment, undertaken by the 7th, 13th,
still
and
screaming
16th
soup
legions.
of barely recognizable
The gene
human
cults,
flesh.
including, amongst others, the famed Selinar, were rapidly and brutally pacified, unable to face this new breed of super soldier. The occult beliefs of these lunar clans were replaced by the imperial truth, and their laboratories quickly subsumed into the Emperor's rapidly expanding Astartes production plans. Luna was the first conquest of the new Imperium, and represents to many imperial historians the start of the Great Crusade proper. It was at this point that the massive cosmic event that would reshape the fate of the galaxy occurred. In the depths of the warp, the entity Slaanesh was born. His 10,000-year gestation was the result of the depravity of the Eldar race, and the cause of the warp storms that had cut humanity off from itself during the Age of Strife. In an instant, his birth annihilated almost the totality of the Eldar race, and the screams tore open a wound in reality, known now to many as the Oculus Malefica, or Eye of Terror, as the Primarch Pertur Abo would later refer to it. The destruction of the Eldar was a boon for humanity. The conquest of Terra and the onset of the Great Crusade had coincided with the calming of the warp and opened the path for mankind to roam the stars once more. To achieve this, the Emperor would need to undertake the greatest logistical, political, and military endeavor ever attempted in the history of humanity.
Okay.
Seems like it goes pretty deep. I'm terrible at remembering a lot of the names, though.
That's just the very short intro.
Oh, I know. I mean, it looks like something that just like, oh my god.
The other channel I was watching actually started further back in the timeline with the Eldar and what it was talking about with the birth of Slaanesh, because basically the Eldar branched off and had a group that were called the Dark Eldar, where they lived for so long because they're like elves essentially. At a point, they stopped being like stimulated by like regular things that like we enjoy, like sex and drugs and alcohol and everything, and so they stooped to depravity and basically became like Cenobites, and they were sadists and masochists and everything, and like got pleasure through pain and such, and just like increasingly fucked up depravity and things. And so
I can see that.
That's what basically they're essentially bad vibes and bad aura birthed that entity of chaos or whatever called Slaanesh, and caused the warp storms and basically fucked over the whole universe essentially in the process. And so everybody's essentially at the beginning of this right here is trying to rebuild from
58
that.
million views.
Well, not this.
Oh, sorry.
That's the next thing we're watching.
Yeah, it's the next thing we're watching.
Good lord.
So, the Warhammer 40k lore, I mean,
It goes deep.
yeah.
I heard that it's a lot to kind of get into and catch up on.
Yeah. It seems worth it, though. Like, it seems really cool to me, in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, I have to, like I said, I mean, we're giving it a shot. I mean, we're watching Hell's Reach and we're watching this. So hopefully, I mean,
if you guys don't want to dive as deep into it as I do, then I may like, you know, we've kind of like hinted at solo reactions at a point.
That
fine. Might be a good idea for me if you guys don't want to keep
like
getting in on it with me
and do solo stuff. I mean, feel free, because I'm not saying you can't. I mean,
that's up to you guys if you want to keep going with it or not.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it would be fun because there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Like this one was just, like I said, a small intro compared to some stuff I've seen so far. Like there's some badass stuff in this.
Yeah. So
I've seen some of the books that are like that thick too, and I'm just like, God.
So and that's just one lore of one race.
Yeah, like each race has a codex. If you go to play the game, and the codex is mostly rules for actually playing as the race.
An older RTS.
Yeah. It's like the original game is the tabletop miniature game, and like they had like
I had a few of the little pieces that were
like,
very
it's at least about that thick for whatever race you decide to play as, and it's got like all the rules for how their units work and everything, and some tidbits of lore. But then there's like a lot more lore you can look into if you want to read books about it and stuff deeper than that.
Yeah.
Or this way is the way that I choose, is to have someone
this
tell it to me, because I have ADD and I have to reread the same line like 3 times for my brain to process what I just read. So
that's the thing, is like it's the names of different stuff like that. I can't. If you had to tell me to tell you exactly what I just watched, I'd be like Terra.
Yeah.
That's Earth. I think.
Yeah, he's name dropping a lot of stuff that he's going to expand on later.
Yeah, it was just like, other than that, I'm like, ugh, I have no idea.
So it's like, basically, quick summary of what we just watched is Terra was basically a planet of barbarians. The Emperor of Mankind was an immortal being that had existed for, like, supposedly he would exist, like, right now, probably, in our timeline somewhere. He's just hiding and not letting anyone know who he is, and he keeps living and gaining knowledge and experience and everything for preparation at this point to finally reveal himself and then unite mankind under one banner to get everybody on the same page to basically start a quest for universal dominion, or at least humanity's survival, like in a very harsh future universe. And so he built those Thunder Warriors, and they were the early versions of the Space Marines.
I love the artwork on it. That was really awesome.
Yeah.
I like the armor from the, what are they called?
The Thunder Warriors?
Yes, that was awesome.
Yeah, it's like early Space Marines that
kinda,
look kind of
like
like
lost real quick.
Spartans or Vikings or something.
Story was.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I like his music choice too for that.
The music was good.
It's pretty cute.
Well, the production of this video was really well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, if y'all want us to continue watching this stuff, feel free to let us know in the comments down below. And if there's anything else you all want us to watch, I mean, feel free to let us know on our Discord, because hey, that's where we receive most of these requests anyway. And if you also want to check out more from us, I mean, we have the subscribe button right there. We got the bell that you can ring to stay notified, and we got a little like button right down here that you can click if you like the video. And I guess that's gonna do it for this one. And until next time, signing off. I'm Nate.
I'm Jacob.
I'm Nick.
And we will see you all in the next one.
For the Emperor.